understands a bit of his thinking. What was he meaning?
China is seizing the moment to make those changes to dovetail the ambitions China has under Xi Jinping, codified in what Xi Jinping calls his China dream of national rejuvenation. And he also talks about creating a common destiny of the humankind, something that he first articulated in Russia in 2013, within a year of him ascending to power in China. That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah, but why would he think he's doing it with Putin when President Putin is, in breach of fundamental Chinese principles like don't interfere with other people's business?
Does Xi Jinping really believe that Putin is violating what is being claimed as China's principle of non-interference in somebody else's business? I think that is exactly the kind of conceptualization we have to address in terms of the new world order that Xi Jinping would like. That's one thing to articulate high-sounding principles. It's a different thing to see what actual actions are being taken. The Chinese call it hear the words but watch the deeds.
Let's move to the US then, and Evelyn Farkas, how do you read the Xi Jinping remark to President Putin? Do you see it as an alliance against the West?
I do, actually. Essentially what Xi is saying is that together we are trying to change the international order. Now, I do think that there's a difference between the two of them. Where they overlap, though, is it allows them to move together. Putin wants to actually go back to the 19th century sphere of influence. He would like to have no United Nations and just have the large states dictate to the smaller states their form of government, their external economic and political affiliations, and that's what he's trying to do with his neo-imperial conquest of Ukraine and Georgia and probably Moldova, if he can get away with that. Whereas Xi is trying to rewrite the rules of the international order. He's not outright challenging the UN Charter. He's saying, let's emphasize borders and sovereignty and the right of states to do whatever they want inside of their countries, and de-emphasize the other part of the UN Charter, which is, human rights, individual rights, group rights, the right to protect. He and Putin agree 100% that the international order, that international community, other countries have no right to interfere in how you are treating your citizens. And they are also aligned because Putin wants to weaken America, wants to weaken the strongest political, economic, and diplomatic power that exists today still, the one that is, of course, willing and able to stand up to Putin's autocratic and neo-imperialist objectives. So right now, they are aligned in the effort also to weaken the United States, also to stand up to the United States and our allies, and to essentially try to assert their power against our power, if you will.
So Martin Wolf, two ideas there, defending non-interference as a principle and taking on the US. Which do you think of those two is most important to Xi and Putin?
Both of them essentially want to do, as all great powers tend to, they want to do what they like, and they don't want anyone to stop them. And the only power that has genuine power and believes it has the right, in addition to stop them, is the West broadly, and above all the United States. So they're against the US domination of the international system and of any institutions that the US might mobilize to hinder what they want to do. And they'll dress this up, of course, in all sorts of different fancy language, but ultimately it's about power. Even the US has had moments of complete madness in exerting its power in the world, and has made many mistakes. So great powers do things like this. I think the fundamental point, to me anyway, is we are at a period of real great power competition. Different ideologies are involved, of course, but also different economic systems. But above all, it's about the rising power of China, the revanchist power of Russia clearly in decline, and the US as the incumbent trying to preserve its system, which it believes in, and of course one that I personally believe in too.
Let's just get more on the Chinese perspective. Dr. Henry Wang is the founder and director of the Center for China and Globalization, a think tank with links to the Chinese Communist Party.
China is trying to become a peacemaker. We are in a very troubled world now, and we have a lot of conflict, a lot of potential conflict. And if China can not only play a big economic role, but also a more mediating role, that should be welcomed by the world.
Because many in the West see it differently and think that China is set on global domination, that it's now competing with the United States, sometimes quite successfully, but that it is a competition.
No, I don't really think so. China never colonized any place. China never placed any soldier anywhere. China did not have any foreign military base, and China never.
It did, didn't it?
No, I don't think so. The world is still the U.S. I mean, they have troops everywhere. They have a military base everywhere, and they basically still patrol the world right now. So through thousands of years of history, Zheng He, the marshal in the 15th century, they have expeditions 7 times, overseas expedition in big voyage. Never stayed anywhere. There's no DNA in the Chinese blood of occupying or take any territories or dominating the world. China is always satisfied with the big intercontinental land and agricultural economy. Confucius culture is always stay at home and do things at home and try to be good to the world.
Can I just ask you about Russia? And as you know, your president was in Russia recently. Russia, which you're describing China as a very peaceful country. I guess you'd agree that Russia isn't. We didn't hear much criticism of Russia's aggression. Why was that?
I think China has already quite strongly said, for example, the one what boycott China Foreign Minister Wang already said sovereignty, territorial integrity of Ukraine should be respected. That's a very strong language. I mean, recent few months after German Chancellor Scholz's visit, China said no nuclear wars or nuclear weapons should be used.
Do you think the West is in decline?
I'm not thinking West is declining. Western certainly has its own advantage. China has its own advantages. So everybody has its own problem. And just like I was talking to Martin Wolf 2 years ago, I mean, we both think that we should address our own problem rather than blame others.
And there you go. Mark, that was Dr. Henry Wang, remembering a conversation, Martin, he had with you 2 years ago. So that shows you the weight of your words. What did you talk to him about, and what do you make of what he just said there?
Well, I was talking to him entirely about the future of globalization and the breakup of the world economy, which we are clearly witnessing. It's gone up much further since then, and the costs that was likely to impose upon the world economy. And he was talking about China being eternally Pacific and so forth. That's another matter, which I didn't discuss.
Evelyn Farkas, let me put that point to you. There he is saying China's peace-loving, no history of occupation, US, Iraq, Afghanistan, all the rest of it. And I think many people listening to this around the world will agree with that and say, China hasn't, at least yet, shown the kind of aggressive international attentions that America.
Well, you can call presenter Mr. Frank Davis in Studio B. He'll be joining us pretty soon. And let me say morning to my executive producer himself, Malik, wherever you are. Good morning to you, Miss.
in the last decade, and they are showing remarkable strength right now. The governor of the Bank of Spain spoke loud and clear last week, and he's constantly stressing the strength of our banks, both in terms of solvency but also liquidity. So we do not see a particular stress in financial markets concerning Spanish banks, but of course we have to follow this situation very closely, because we have very vivid memories, from the last financial crisis, so we have to remain very vigilant. For the moment, the message is one of calm and confidence.
Very good, Deputy Prime Minister. We have to leave it there. Great pleasure to meet you this morning. Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Some other news stories for you now. UK house prices fell this month at an annual rate of 3.1%. That was the largest annual decline since July 2009, according to Nationwide Building Society. On a month-on-month basis, prices fell by 0.8%, which was the seventh such fall in a row. According to Nationwide, the average property now costs £257,122, which is 4.6% lower than the peak hit in August last year. Nationwide also published its quarterly regional house price indices, which showed that during the first 3 months of the year, there was a slowdown in annual house price growth in all regions. 9 of the 13 regions measured by Nationwide saw annual house price declines during the quarter, with Scotland and East Anglia seeing the biggest declines. The West Midlands and Northern Ireland were the best performers. And as we were at now, Dignity, the UK's biggest funeral provider, warned this morning it is still in need of a significant capital injection after plunging into the red. The company, which has a near 12% of the funeral services market and the cremation market, reported a pre-tax loss of £328.6 million for 2022, compared with a profit of £32 million in 2021. Well, that reflected impairment charges, but also higher wage costs, price cuts, and a trend in the market for lower-priced funerals. Well, the news comes 2 months after Dignity agreed to a £281 million takeover by a consortium led by Sir Peter Wood, the entrepreneur who founded the insurers Direct Line and eSure. The new chief executive of Rolls-Royce has continued to ring the changes at the aircraft engine maker by bringing in a new chief financial officer. Tufan Erginbilgic has hired Helen McCabe from BP, where she's currently senior vice president of finance for the company's customer and products division. Well, Mr. Erginbilgic, who is himself a former BP executive, has already replaced a number of senior managers at Rolls, including the head of its civil aerospace arm and its head of defence. Well, Rolls named new occupants for both those jobs this morning, while also replacing the head of its small modular reactor business. Well, as I mentioned just a moment ago in our interview with the Spanish Deputy Prime Minister, the UK has been accepted into an Indo-Pacific trade bloc in what the government says is its biggest trade deal since Brexit. Well, the UK will become the 12th member of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, or CPTPP, which includes Australia, Japan, New Zealand, Canada and Mexico. Well, the Department of Business and Trade says that joining the partnership will cut tariffs on key UK exports, including cheese, chocolate, gin, whiskey and cars. And it says membership will boost the UK's economy by £1.8 billion during the next decade. That is less than 1% of Britain's annual GDP. Well, joining me now is Marco Forgione. He's he's Director General at the Institute of Export and International Finance. Mr. Forgione, welcome to you. I mean, £1.8 billion is a good benefit, but in the great scheme of things, a £2.2 trillion economy, it's not really very much, is it?
Well, Ian, I think that there are a number of areas where we need to judge whether the accession to CPTPP is really valuable. The first, as you've highlighted, is around the economics of it, and the fact that the accession gives the UK access to free trade in goods, services and inward investment to what are some of the most dynamic, fastest growing economies in the world. It is hugely positive. And the assessment of the impact, that 0.08% of GDP, is just on the current community of 12, and it's clear that there's a lot of interest now that the UK has been accepted from other economies and other nations to also join CPTPP. So those benefits, I think, will accrue over time. The second area to look at is around supply chain resilience, and we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years the impact of the disturbance to global supply chains. So the relationship we now have with key economies, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, mean that we are able to restructure and reframe the UK supply chains to make sure that they are more sustainable to support UK businesses. And the third area we need to look at is around the geopolitics of this. CPTPP is one of the most modern and progressive trade agreements. And when you're looking at leading global trade around a liberal, rules-based, free trading economic structure, then this is a really very important move.
Now, the big prize is obviously if the United States joins, because that would potentially give us backdoor entry to a sort of trade deal with the US. But of course, China is looking to join as well. Is there room in CPTPP for both the US and China?
Well, both China and Taiwan are looking to join, and there are going to be complexities around the conversations that the member states will have to have regarding both Taiwan and China. Looking specifically at America, the reality is that the Biden administration currently is much more inward-looking. They're not having a program now of free trade agreements or looking externally. So I don't think we'll see the US seek to join CPTPP immediately. But if you look at what the UK government is doing with the MOUs with individual states in the UK, I think that there are positive moves with regards to the UK's relationship to the United States.
Now, there are some controversial elements to this, not least, for example, Canadian beef, which is currently banned in the UK because it's treated with hormones. We're now going to have to accept some Canadian beef under the terms of this deal.
And Ian, Institute of Export and International Trade members have raised this as a concern for us, and we've looked in through the details, we've spoken to the department, and it's clear that there will be no requirement at all for the UK to accept Canadian hormone-treated beef. If it is beef that is produced to the UK standards, then of course there is a quota for Canadian beef, but it has to be produced to the quality and standards that the UK requires.
Very good. Thanks for clearing that up. I mean, we haven't talked about some of the other countries that are looking to join, not least South Korea and Thailand. Presumably that would be quite a good win for the UK as well.
It really is, Ian. The momentum behind CPTPP and the economies and the nations that are who've been on the sidelines looking to join will be inspired now by what the UK has done. And as I've said, these are the fastest growing, most dynamic economies in the world. And when you look at what the future of trade is going to be, this places the UK right at the very heart and will help support the UK economy as it seeks to grow over the coming decades.
Very good. Marco, we have to leave it there. Good to see you this morning. Thank you. Now, there's been a building on Old Broad Street in the city called Winchester House since before the Great Fire of London. The original, once home to the Marquess of Winchester, was replaced in 1886 by a building designed by the Victorian architect Frederick Thomas Pilkington. That made way for a 22-storey office block completed in 1968, which was in turn demolished after it was damaged in 1993 by an IRA bomb. Well, now the building that's replaced it has been bought for £257 million by the Malaysian construction firm Gamuda and the UK investor Castleforge Partners, who plan to redevelop it. Joining me now is Michael Kovacs. He's a founding partner at Castleforge. Michael, morning to you. You're planning a redevelopment put at almost £1 billion. What do you have in mind?
Good morning, Ian. Thanks very much. Absolutely. We are looking to transform this building from what it currently is, which is a fundamentally good building, but with lacking the amenities and the kind of ESG credentials and all of the bells and whistles that most modern tenants are really looking for. And that means turning it into a building which has great sustainability credentials, BREEAM outstanding targets, turning it into a sustainable building in terms of zero carbon, in terms of operations, and turning it into the kind of building that I think employers are going to be able to say to their employees, here's a reason to come back into the office. You can be in this building every day.
Well, that's a very good point you've raised. I mean, this is one of the biggest commercial property deals in the UK so far this year. You're not worried about people working from home more?
No, I don't think that the working from home market is necessarily going to affect all buildings equally. I think some of the best buildings, and we've seen this around the world. I'm joining you from New York, but I obviously live in London. We've seen some of the best buildings around the world in major key cities like London and New York and other gateway markets. hold up better than the rest of the office market. And so I think that there's this dynamic of the market splitting into two, where work from home is having a major impact on the rest of the buildings out there, but the best buildings are the ones which continue to attract tenant interest, and actually rents today for those buildings are higher than they were pre-COVID. So that's really proof positive that some of these buildings continue to attract tenant interest.
As I mentioned in the introduction, this building stands on quite a historic site. The City of London can be quite prickly about giving planning consent under such circumstances. Are you anticipating any obstacles there?
No, I think we've got a great relationship with the City of London. We've actually just gone through the planning process on another project we have by Barbican at 1 Golden Lane, and that was a successful process with the City of London. So we really look forward to working with the planners. I think what they're going to be attracted to by this building is that sustainability that we were talking about before. You know, we're not going to knock this building down. We're actually going to keep the existing building and reuse it. And I think that is one of the stated goals of the City of London, and I think the planners are going to be really excited about that in terms of just rather than knocking the building down and building something else in its place.
Now, the building, of course, is currently home to Deutsche Bank. They're due to move out in April next year. I assume you can't do much work until they've gone, can you?
That's correct in terms of the building work, but there's a lot of work to do before we start knocking the building apart. You've got the whole planning process, as you mentioned, to run through. You have the whole pre-design and design stages where we're going to figure out what we want to do exactly with the building. So there's still a lot to do. The funny thing about Deutsche Bank actually is that they're moving across the street. So they clearly love the location and wanted probably to stay in this building, but in fact they expanded into a building that was over 50% larger than this one. So again, giving a little bit of proof to the fact that some tenants are expanding in the market today.
Absolutely right. It is a fabulous location. Michael, good to see you this morning, and thanks for joining me at such an early time in the day. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Ian.
Well, last night's positive close on Wall Street was followed by gains for equities overnight in the Asia-Pacific region. That was despite some disappointing Chinese manufacturing data that came out overnight. All of the main indices in the Asia-Pacific region finished ahead, as you can see there. In Europe, markets were a little bit mixed earlier on. Let's have a look at what they're doing now. All of them in positive territory, although the main indices all look like finishing the first quarter of 2023 on a high. The DAX, for example, is up some 11.5% right now in the quarter. Meanwhile, the CAC 40 in France is ahead by some 12%. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 is also going into the end of the quarter on a positive note, currently some 16 points to the good, a fifth of 1% higher. Gains for healthcare stocks are balancing out losses among mining and oil stocks. The leading blue chip gainer in percentage terms right now is the Lloyds insurer Beazley Group. The shares up by just shy of 2%. In fact, look at that, it's been overtaken by International Airlines Group. I could have asked the Spanish Deputy Prime Minister about that, because of course that has a Spanish CEO in Ignacio Galán. His shares ahead by some 2.25% on getting a push from the brokers. Meanwhile, Ocado is up by 1.75%. It's won a patent dispute this morning with a Norwegian company. Outside the FTSE, the pub operator Marston's is currently ahead by some 3%. That's after it secured an extension to its credit facilities. Meanwhile, Wizz Air is up by nearly 3%. It's another stock that's had a push from the brokers this morning. On the downside, the cybersecurity specialist NCC, its shares are currently off by some 39% following a profits warning. On the foreign exchange markets, well, the US dollar is actually poised for its second consecutive quarterly loss. That's amid expectations that US interest rates are peaking. Sterling is down 0.1% right now against the greenback. It's completely unchanged against the euro. Meanwhile, the single currency is off 0.1% against the dollar. As for the oil price, well, that has given up some of its gains from earlier in the week. It still looks set to finish the week higher, but as I say, it's lower this morning. A barrel of Brent crude currently costing $78.96 a barrel. That is off a little over a third of 1%. Well, joining me now is Sophie Lund-Yates. She's lead equity analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown. Sophie, good to see you this morning. We've had a really torrid couple of weeks with the banks, but peace has broken out this week.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I couldn't have put that better myself. We are seeing some brightness come through on the global markets. I'm very, very happy to say. And there are a couple of things that are pushing things in that direction. The big one, as you say, is that the very worst of these banking fears are at the moment, as things stand, they're stable. They are largely behind investors' main cause of worry. And the second thing, the really big one as well, is we've had some comments from the Federal Reserve, which really has helped investors relax a little bit in terms of their acknowledgement that further tightening is possible, that one more increase in interest rates is what's expected to come through, and that's actually sent quite a few bits of relief through the market. And really, I think as well, something that's just quite telling, you were just doing a roundup there in quarterly terms. When we look at the first quarter of this year, tech stocks are up 19%. So what that's telling me is that investors are absolutely kind of reversing and coming back into riskier assets, i.e. equities, and therefore that's why the market has done what it's done so far.
And this is all underpinned, of course, by expectations that interest rates are peaking both in Europe and the United States. But, I mean, the backdrop has really not been that great. You've still got inflation in double digits in some parts of the world. The war in Ukraine is ongoing. It's almost as if investors have put some of those issues to one side.
Absolutely, it would be completely wrong to brush everything aside and say that we're definitely on a clear route to prosperity for markets, even if things are brightening up a little bit. You touched on it there. The really big one is, perhaps unsurprisingly, is inflation, and particularly core inflation. So that's proving very, very sticky in developed markets. The one thing that I would say that is something to watch is that actually when we think about it, credit issuance in China is expected to reduce this year, and what that should mean is things that trickle down, and that could help keep some heat out of inflation. So really is kind of an outside metric to be watching. That's certainly something I'll be keeping an eye on.
Absolutely, and another thing to keep an eye on today, of course, is the US jobs data.
Yes, definitely. So we heard yesterday that the US jobs data has still been, essentially it's showing that the labour market in the US is still very, very hot, even though the applications for jobless benefits have increased, or decreased rather. No, increased, sorry, they have increased. And they are still really showing that the market out there for labour is very, very hot. And that is likely to be keeping a lid on things in terms of gains in the US market today, because what that does show you comes back to inflation once more, in terms of this fact that wage increases and wage inflation is still very much a problem in that area of the world.
Okay, Sophie, got to leave it there. Good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're just going to return now to the breaking news that we brought you a little earlier in the programme concerning the former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan, who of course has been under investigation from the Cricket Disciplinary Commission. It's been investigating accusations. He racially accused a number of his Yorkshire teammates. We've now had confirmation that he has been cleared of those charges. We can go back to our sports news correspondent Rob Harris, who's at Yorkshire County Cricket Club in Headingley. So Rob, formal confirmation of what you were telling us a few minutes ago.
Yeah, we are still going through the rest of the case. There's quite a few.
And I'm an immunologist. COVID-19 is still with us and making people ill every day. But it's not too late for all adults to book their first or second NHS COVID-19 vaccination. To get these vaccinations while they are still available and protect yourself and those around you, visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination or call 119.
Hi guys, this is your friend Uruj from SendWave. SendWave is a money transfer app that is used by people all over the world to send money to their loved ones in Africa. With SendWave, you can send money to Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. And the best part is, SendWave is absolutely commission free. Our exchange rates are excellent. You can see for yourself by checking them out on our website. So how do you use SendWave? SendWave is an app that you can download onto your phone from the App Store or Google Play Store. The app is free to download. After downloading it, just open the app and enter your name, email and phone number. That's it, you're good to go. Make sure you use the promo code SR, S for Star, R for Radio. This promo code will give you £5 free credit to send to Africa on your first transaction. Your money will be delivered to your recipient within seconds. Feel free to call me on 0749 7377 647 at any time. I'll be happy to tell you all about Sendwave and help you in any way I can. Remember to use the promo code SR for £5 free credit. Medasse.
Are you looking for the fastest, reliable, and trustworthy door-to-door shipment company? Well, look no further. When was the last time your family received a shipment back in Ghana on time and in time? You are not sure? Well, Lamb Shippers, we pride ourselves with being the fastest, reliable, and trustworthy shippers you can use. You are assured of a prompt pickup anywhere in the UK by our personnel. They also make sure your items are well packaged to get to its destination in time. When it comes to door-to-door shipment, look no further. Well, Lamb Shippers, contact us on 07939009321 or 074